Well, hello everybody, and this week I am live. So thank you for turning up last week. I just couldn't be avoided. I had to be somewhere else at the same time, and I would have normally have put that in a slightly different place, but I wasn't sure whether everybody was going to be able to know where to go for that. So I just thought best to do the live session, which was pre-recorded, and I was watching some of the chat. So thank you for those that took part in that. This week, we're going to try something similar, but just pushing it in a different direction, learning some new skills, and just getting that code down. Because actually, when I have a look at the whole scheme, we're not actually too far away from finishing the core of everything that we need to know. And then it's just a case of me showing you exactly what words you need to know, maybe making a list of that, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that in a second. And then after Easter, we can talk to the school about getting us online to do a test for this if you want to complete the Thinking as a Coder Level 2 qualification and have the first GCSE kind of level before many of your peers, many years ahead of schedule. So that'd be something great to do. And there's no pressure if you want to do that test. You can do it multiple times until we get it through. But we'll do some practice tests. We'll show you what it's like nearer the time. But if you're just following it to find out more about Python, that's good too. So let's get to the nitty gritty of everything that we have here. So just as a little reminder, as I do kind of every week, and I am getting better at it, like and subscribe. We always do like that. And keep having a look in the chat. We've got a couple of people in there so far. And what we're having a look at this week is, again, go to digital.edu.je if you want to follow along with the code, because I'm going to do some code today and much faster if you copy and paste through this today. So I'm going to make it a little bit easier to copy and paste, as you'll see in a second. And we are going to use Trinket again, but I'll show you that later. So when you're on the Thinking as a Coder site, you got that live link, which takes us to where we are today. And we've got learning materials, which takes us off to some other places. And we've got Trinket itself. But as we said, we've got this Python link in the top corner. If you click Trinket, it will just open it up. And I believe I've got it in the Python zone. We will be doing that in a moment. But if you actually go to the Python link at the top here, what I've done is I've replaced the code that was in here before, and I've put a document in here that's live. So every time I type and edit in this document, it's going to keep making this better. If you want to see this larger, you just click on this little icon here, and it will send it full screen to have a look at the code. And you can zoom in or zoom out using the percentages that's there and have a look at the code. So I've put the loop that was there before. I've put the condition. I haven't talked about list yet, but I will do. This was the random number stuff we did a while ago, and we're going to talk about FizzBuzz code today. So you'll be able to just copy and paste the code into Trinket, just as easy as that. And then when you press play, it will do what we need it to do. So that's kind of the way in which it's going to work today. I've got the code here, like I've just said, ready to go for this. So the whole idea here is that we're going to have a go at making a popular game in schools. It's like a getting to know you game. You may have played FizzBuzz before in your life. All it is you take all the numbers, and I will zoom in on this one just a tad more. There we go. Move my screen over to the side. And what we've got here is if you take the numbers just counting up from 1 onwards, if you have a multiple of 3 or the number is divisible by 3, you say fizz. If it's divisible by 5, you say buzz. And if it's divisible by both, and the first number here, which is 15, which is divisible by 3 and 5, you would say fizz buzz instead of just one or the other. And it's usually a game you may have played when a class is getting to know it, or they call it team building games. And you go around the class and you just see if you do it fizz, buzz, or you just say the number and you move on. And then if you get it wrong, you're out the game and we see who's left. So it's something you may or may not have played before. So it would go something like this. I would go 1, next person 2, the next person would have to say fizz, 4, buzz, fizz, 7, 8, fizz, buzz, 11, fizz, 13, 14, fizz, buzz. And then you keep going. And you do that as quickly as you can, and you see who's left in the room. So that's the kind of essence of the FizzBuzz game. So let's see how we could build this in Python as an application, as I have here. And I'm going to go through the whole thing, and what all looks complicated, we're going to go through in smaller parts today. So a reminder, which you can find on this area now, on the kind of code guide, I'm calling it now. And every time you want to do something, you can just click on here and it'll take you to this place. And for those that are just joining a little bit late, just find that on the Thinking as a Coder site under the Python tab, which you can get to with digital.edu.je. So when we're on that, let's just grab this, and I'm just going to do it myself. I'm going to copy this code, this loop code here, and I'm going to paste it into Python. Now, remember, we can go to trinket.io/Python, or you can go to the Thinking as a Coder website at the home page and just click Trinket, and it'll take you there. So I'm going to paste that in. I could have written it, but the whole point of this code, guys, is to speed up our journey. So we're not just typing away, we're just exploring and doing. So we've got for I in range 6, print I. And when I press play, that does 0, and this is going to be important, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 6 numbers, but computers start with the number 0. Okay. If I wanted to do 1 to 6, I could do 1 to 6, and then it will just, because there's 5 numbers in there, it just gives you those. So we've got different ways to do it. We'd always have to knock it on 1, and that will give me my 1 to 6. So it's a bit odd with computers. You always have to +1 with your value, or you can just understand that's the case. So like I said, computers, we first start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's a weird scenario, but it's very important to computing that we understand that. So we know how to loop now. So let's see how we might start to play this game. And again, you can go to the code guide and you can follow along on another page, or follow along as you're watching this. And it's after the random number, and I'm going to start by this. So the first problem we have is, how do we work out, and I'll zoom in a little bit now and move my screen up a little bit. I know the last time I did this, I was typing too much in my head. There we go. And how do we work out what numbers are divisible by certain numbers? Now, I'm going to show you a way, and it's not the best in the world, but it works. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a slightly better and a new formula that's really useful in computing. So is a number divisible by 3? That's the first Fizz part of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some testing. I'm going to do x equals input, which is me about to type a number in. I'm going to open a bracket, open a speech mark, and type in a number. And all that does when I press play is it gets me to type a number in. So that'd be pretty useless at the moment. So I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to do another value, which is x equals. Now this is going to be very important, because this x int equals x is basically converting the number I'm typing in into an integer, a value. Now that might seem weird. I'm going to stop and press play, but we need to understand that when I type that 8 in, that's a character. It's not a number. We know it as a number. Our brains are intelligent. We can follow that. But a computer doesn't know that until you tell it. So we tell it with this x, this integer, int value. Now I could have sped up my code here, and I could have taken that and got rid of this line if I wanted to. And I could have done int and then put the whole input into there, and that would have sped up. That would have been a nicer line of code. But I'm just going to separate it out for the moment to make it a little bit more obvious and to show you that there's different ways of doing things. So the next thing then is to say if. We're making a statement. So I've typed in a number, and then we're going to say if the number you gave me, x, Okay, now again, we could have called these, if you don't like X and Y's, we could have called this like num equals number and then done all the X's as that, but I don't mind it. I'm just lazy. I like to use letters wherever I can. And we're going to say if X, the number I've just typed in, when you divide it by 3, and we're going to put this into brackets because we're going to do this first. When we divide it by 3 and then times it by 3, we're going to say, does it equal the number we're starting with? Now, at the moment, that's always going to be the case. Now, I'm going to throw a little bit of a confusing thing in here, but you can ignore it because I don't like this way of doing it. What we say is we use that int again. Okay, if the number we're dividing by and then we times it by 3 is the same number, then effectively it's the same as dividing it by 3 and checking that it does that if it comes back as the same number. Now, I know that seems really weird, and I'm going to show you a much easier way to do this, so you can kind of ignore this for the moment because I don't like the example I was given to demonstrate here. I think this is a really confusing bit of code. But if it's that, we finish off with the colon. We then print Fizz. Use the speech marks to say we're going to print a string. Oh, don't know where that star came from. There we go. And if it's not Fizz, we're going to do else, and then we're going to do the colon again, and we're going to print the number itself. Okay, that's all we're going to do. So if it's divisible by 3, then it's going to do it. Let's have a little look what that looks like. What number are we talking about? 8. Press enter. 8 doesn't divide by 3, so it's just replied the number back. If I did it again and choose one I know divided by 3, 9, it's a Fizz number. Excellent. And if I was to go really big and do 999, is that a Fizz or isn't that a Fizz? It is. Of course it is. So we've got those kind of numbers and we can test them out. I do not like this confusing part here. So I'm going to build this better. Okay, and when we come to the code guide, underneath it, we've got the buzz part that I'm about to do, but better with a strange character that I think makes things a lot easier. So we still want to input a number, but I'm going to get rid of this confusing part here. And what I'm going to say is if X, the number that we have just typed in, when you divide by 5, what I want to do is say, is there a remainder? So if you divide any number and it's divisible by 5, you get no remainder, right? If it's not divisible by 5, so 6, you get remainder 1. If it's 7, remainder 2. So we use that remainder by using a percentage. So you say, if when you divide by 5 and it says equals, because we're going to compare, if that equals 0, which means there's no remainder, then it works. We do the little colon in there as well. That's it. I think that's an easier bit of code than all the ints and the divide and the times by. Let me know in the comments if you think that is better. But all this sentence says, and I'll type it out, if X, when you divide it by 5, gives you a remainder of 0, then it's divisible by 5. And that percentage sign, the posh word for it, is modulo. Don't need to remember that. Just the symbol kind of gives it away. It looks a bit like a divide by sign as well, doesn't it? If you divide by 5 and it just gives you the remainder, it doesn't tell you how many times it goes in. So if you did 501, the answer here would be 1. It just tells you the remainder. Then this is a really useful way to find out if a number is divisible by another number. So when I press play now, and I've done divided by 5 this time, then, so I didn't do my colon there, did I? That's important. And if I do my number divided by 5, so let's do 10 because I know that's the case. I've done Fizz, but remember I didn't change that. Fizz was divided by 3. Buzz is divided by 5. I'll be saying Fizz and Buzz so many times today. So let's go for 11. We know 11 doesn't divide by 5, so it's just plain old 11. Do it again and do 500 as we did before, because we know that works. Big numbers, and we got the buzz there as well. So it's working. And I just find that a much tidier way of working out if there's a remainder and if a number is divisible by another, rather than the other way of doing it. So let's do this a little bit longer then. And this time round, and I'm going to change the code live actually, because I'll show you what I mean by changing it live. I've just noticed as I was going through the code guide here that when I went to the buzz range here, I did divided by 3 and I wanted to do divided by 5. So you would have seen that if you're on this document live, change immediately to the correct answer there, or the correct answer. So I quite like using that method. So let's have a little go at what we do here. So I'm not going to be typing anything in anymore. I can get rid of all of that code. And this time I'm going to use the same as what we did before. 4x in range. And I'm going to get this wrong the first time I would do it. 100. It then says then, and we've got the colon there. We then type in the next one, or we follow this stuff here. Now, because it's got this colon, it will indent. So I do need to take the code that we had and indent everything one more. That's all it is, because I'm using this. And when I press play, there we go. We've got our buzzes. We don't have our fizzes as well yet. We just got the buzzes. But there is an error, because what you'll do is you'll look at this and go, hang on, why did it start with a buzz? Because we start with the number 0. So what we really need to do is knock on 1 like we did before. So instead of just 100, we do 1, start with 1 and end in 101, and that will actually do 100 values that we've done. So we start with the number 1 there. It's just because we start with 0 in coding. That's the only real reason why we have to do that. And then you'll see all these numbers seem to be working all the way until 100, which is a buzz number because it's divided by 5. Excellent. Okay, so how do we do all of it together? Well, what we've got is we've got to do 2 things at the same time. Now, we can do this in different ways, and at the end, we're going to decide whether or not we've done it the most efficient way, the best way, but we are going to have completed the task anyway. So I'm going to start all the way from scratch just so we can explain it as we go here. And this time around, I'm just going to put in a hashtag, because that's my commenting. I'm just going to leave a comment for myself to remind me that I'm about to write a function to find if a number is divisible by another, by x even. Okay. Now this is going to return a true or a false kind of answer. It's just going to say it either does or it doesn't. I don't need to know what the remainders are. Don't need to know anything like that. We're just going to do it. Okay. So the important part here is I don't want to have to keep asking the computer the same thing over and over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define my function. And you'll notice it changed color. Just see it just up there above my head, just as I'm doing that. DE is in black. And as soon as I do F, it turns that kind of purpley color, because that is something that's very important in coding and in Python, is we're defining a function, a thing that will repeat over and over again. Now, the useful part about this function is I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to call it is divided by. We use that camel case that we talked about before. Code doesn't like spaces, so we use capitals to separate the words out. And I'm now going to say there are some, I'm going to declare some variables here, and I'm going to say, well, the number x, the one that we're counting, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way down, the thing that's going to just keep repeating over and over again. And then we're going to ask it to do a divided or divide by number, so the 3 or the 5. Okay, so we've now got this ability to put in these variables here, and we're now going to say, when you've done that, I want you to return the true fact, and again it goes pink because it's a very important thing. And again, don't worry too much, this is the higher levels of the code that you just need to follow rather than understand. The stuff that we get tested on is the like times and the divide stuff, and hopefully you'll just be able to read this code. And we're going to return x, the number x, divided by the number, so the modulo, and then the number we want to divide by. So what I'm saying here for this one is, and I'm going to close the, oh sorry, not close the bracket off, divide by equals 0, double. So effectively what we're saying here is, I'm going to call something is divided by. Every time I call is divided by, I just say that those characters there, you're going to do whatever number we're on, whatever number I'm asking you to divide by, and you're going to do this check to see if there's a remainder. And it's going to do that every time I just ask it to do this. So it's saving me typing time. And the thing is, I can add multiple things like here when I do actual code over and over and over and over again. So while we're only doing something short now, today, when we come to do more complicated, or you come to do more complicated code, you will find that this saves you a lot of time. And I was going to do the example in the code, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go straight to the answer for this one today, because I think it's just quicker to do that. But have a play. There is one called dividing check. See if you can follow that one in the thinking as a coder part here. I was going to go through the dividing check, but I think it's one that you can have a little go at yourself. I'm going to go straight to the final answer here. And what we're going to do is we've called that definition. Nothing's happening yet. We haven't called it. We've just asked it to do that job. And then we're going to write our actual problem. So we're going to say for x in range, and we're going to choose to do 1 to 100. And again, that sounds odd to type it like that, but we don't want it to start with 0. We wanted to do those 100 numbers. And I will come back to see if we can do this a better way. We're going to say if is divided by, so this is where I'm calling it, okay? So this is the function that I've called, and now I'm asking it to go and do that. And what were the two things I wanted it to check? I wanted it to do the number we're on, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I want to say, does it divide by 3? So that's a quicker way of writing this out multiple times. And again, while it's not a lot faster, the more stuff we come to add as the weeks go on, the better this will become. It will save us huge amounts of time. So when we ask, is it divided by 3, we're also going to ask straight afterwards, that's why it's come in, and I'm going to do the same thing again, divided by. And this time, I'm not going to say, is it divided by 3? I'm going to say, if it's also divided by 5, then go straight to print FizzBuzz. Fizz would help. So it seems a bit weird that we go straight to the FizzBuzz one, but what we're saying is the hardest thing to work out is when both things happen at the same time. So it's the first check you should check. Is it divided by 3? And is it divided by 5? Now, if it was divided by 3 here, and it was divided by 5, we have FizzBuzz. But if we didn't get to divide by 5 as well, if it was only divided by 5, we would then do else underneath here, print Fizz. Because what we're saying here is, I asked you if we were divided by 3, and you said yes. Brilliant. If you're divided by 3, I've also got to ask you divided by 5. There. And if that's true, then we do the whole FizzBuzz. But if you said yes to 3, but no to 5, then it's just divided by 3, which is Fizz. Okay, I know this sounds like it is semi-complicated, but this is the easiest way I could probably do it. And then to finish off, if you weren't divided by 3 at the very beginning, you'd then ask, okay, well, if you weren't divided by 3, were you divided by 5? So these are the only options that we have. And if you were divided by 5, guess what? We print the buzz part. There we go. And then if it was none of those, then we do the else, just print the number. Because it was not divided by 3, not divided by 5, so I just want to print the number out. Now let's just check that I've got the everything in line. Is if it was divided by that, then that should be okay. Let me just do this, press play. There we go. So let's have a little look. I've done that. I'm just going to scroll up and down here so I can have a look at the values. 1, 2, oh, let's have a look here. So what's the error that we have? So, oh, there we go. I just needed to do that as well. There we go. I'll explain that in a second. And then print that out again. There we go. We've got it perfect this time. So what I've done, and this is why indents and why I'm going to show you a better way of writing this. When we had this indent here, it wasn't asking the questions in the right order. So what we wanted it to do was say, if it's divided by 3, check, brilliant. If it's divided by 5 as well, fizz buzz. If it's not that, but then if it's not that again, we're continuing the same question. If I brought it in, it would have been a new question, which wouldn't have been useful. And if you think that this is quite complicated to work out the order, I agree, because I wouldn't do it like this. Okay, what I would do personally is do if else's. I don't like what we call nested tables, when we keep doing these indents after indent after indent. It can get quite confusing. So what I would have done for me personally is said, not is it divided by, I go straight with a hard question. If the is divisible by 3 and I don't like the nested, no point doing it. I want to ask it a straight question, one at a time. If it's divided by that, and do you know what I'm going to do here? I'm going to copy this section. I keep using it loads all the time, and then paste it in. So if it's divisible by 3 and 5, that's just a question I want to ask it. Print FizzBuzz. Okay. I use capitals just so it makes it more obvious. Okay, then I'm going to do a new question. I don't want to ask these kind of nested table staggering parts. I just want to ask it one question after another. Now, because I know I'm going to have a few questions here, I'm not going to write it correctly, and I'll show you how I would code it and then change it to make it right. I know I've got if else's, but I know I'm going to have quite a few. So this is wrong, but I'm going to explain why I do it. So if it's that, 3 and 5, it's FizzBuzz. Else is, oh no, I was going to do it now, just is it divided by 3, just a straight 3, then print fizz. Then I go to the next question, else is it divided by 5, just asking straight questions one after another, then print buzz. There we go. And lastly, last question, else all of them. If it's none of those, then we just print the number, what's left over. Now, what isn't correct here, if I go to press play here at the top, it's going to move my head away again in a minute. When I press play, it's going to go straight here to the else. And that's because you can't just do if, else, 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 else. If is the first thing. Else is the last thing. Everything else in between, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, is else if. So that's the hardest thing that we need to understand. We can ask multiple questions over and over and over and over and over, as long as we start with an if, end in an else, like the last thing. What happens if nothing else works? And every other question in between is your else if. So when I press play now, I'm going to get my answers. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that works. 4, 5, 6 is a fizz. Yeah, it's all working. FizzBuzz is the 15. Working. Lovely. So there are multiple ways that we can answer these questions, and you just have to choose whichever one you prefer. If you didn't mind the nested table solution, if this made sense to you here, where we had these, if it's divided by 3, then if it's divided by 3, yes. Is it also divided by 5? If that makes sense to you in this way, absolutely fine. Go for it. I just prefer to use individual questions, so we haven't got loads of nested tables, and I like to use the and. We can use an or, okay, and or even. We'll get to all those at a later stage, but the and seems to make a little bit more sense to me. So, you know, in the comments, if you want to put in, are you a nested table person or are you an else if person? Be interesting to know what type of person that you are. And again, it's been quite complicated. I'll do a easier session next week, I think, with just remembering some words, and so we're going to do some ands and ors and some logical stuff in there. But I felt while we've done quite a lot of code recently, it might be good to keep going with this. And then we get to the real question at the very end. Did I really need this? Did I really need this? Now, it saves me typing here, okay? But I could have written this without any of this. And the reason why I'm showing you all of this today is really to explain that there are multiple ways of doing the same answer. There are different ways of writing code, some more efficient than others, but we're at the stage where we're getting to know Python. We just want to get things done. I want something that works. And for now, whatever makes sense to you, go for it. And we can look at the efficiencies and better ways of doing it at a later stage. So what I might do is write it in a completely different way to show you that we don't have to use letters like X, we can use words. So I'm going to say for FB, for FizzBuzz. I think in the code I call it, here I've got the code, I've got it as FizzBuzz in range. In fact, I think I'll change that. I'll just do FB. It just makes sense there. Print FizzBuzz, though I want to print, so I want to keep that. Else FB, print buzz, print FizzBuzz. There we go. I think we're okay. Fizz and buzz. Yeah, that all works nicely. So let's see what I do. So for FizzBuzz, any number, okay, in range. And again, we are not wanting to do the just 100. We do the 1 to 101 because we know that numbers start with 0. So for all of these numbers, all 100, in fact, let's go big. For 1,000 numbers that we have there, I'm just going to ask it straight individual questions for each and every number 1,000 times. If the number that I'm looking at, FB, okay, so the first number, number 1, then number 2, then number 3, it's going to keep repeating this. If the leftover from dividing by 3, if the remainder of 3 equals, because we want to compare it, we only do equals singular when we're giving something, assigning it a value. When we want it to compare, we use 2 equals. And I want to know if the same number, when the leftover of 5 or the remainder of 5 is used, is also equal to 0, then print FizzBuzz. Okay. That's that. That's the first question. Is it a FizzBuzz number? If it's not a FizzBuzz number, we go to else. But because we know we're going to ask it a few questions, it's an else if. So else if FizzBuzz just divided by 3, or is there any leftover? So is there any leftover when we do that? Then print Fizz. Oh, needed the speech marks at the beginning there. There we go. And I'm going to ask another question. So it's another else if. The Fizz buzz, I could have copy and pasted this to save myself a bit of time, but I'm just writing it out. If it's divided by 5 with no remainder, then print buzz. There we go. And if anything else is left over, if it's not divided by 5 and 3, if it's not divided by 3 and not divided by 5, then the last thing, so it's an else, and we don't need a condition for this, that's why it's an else, we just print FB, the number itself. Okay, that's it. That's the code. So we didn't need to maybe use the program or use the function to do all of this. So let's press play and check it works. Might take a little while. 1,000 is quite a big number for it. So I think I've just frozen the screen. Maybe it can't cope with that. Yeah, it seems to have ended at 79 there. So let me just refresh that page. See if I've broken the online emulator here for that. There we go. No, not liking it, is it? I think I may have broken it. There we go. So there we go. Oh, it came just as I did it there. So if you do go big, be prepared that it will freeze by the looks of it there. So let me come in again and paste that. There we go. So it's all the way up to 9 to break it. So maybe 1,000 is a little bit high. But did we need the function that we had? Maybe not. But we are going to need functions later on. And the ability to define functions and then call them later with changeable variables here is a very useful thing to do. And I wanted to start it off with something that was quite basic, or, you know, easier to follow, like a basic FizzBuzz game, without having to do the complex parts of it. Because when we did the create your own adventure, and we go back to this area and we go back to the create your own adventure type area, and we go all the way to the kind of last version of that, that's where we start to have these defined starts, these functions that just do the start of the game. Then we define a different room. Functions are really useful to separate stuff out. And again, we've got our else's, we've got some ifs, we've got some if else's, lots of different things going through. And the complicated work that we do there is helped by understanding some of the more basic concepts, which are the functions, and these extra little lovely things like the modulo code in here that makes life easier for you. So again, we've made quite an easy kind of game. Not that many lines of code. We'll do something a little bit lighter next week rather than just go straight into the code. And hello, Roy Hawk, who's ever's there as well. Say hello to everyone that's there. But we are getting to the end of the kind of technical learning. And from a few lessons on, I'll just see how many I think I've got exactly. There's a couple of other things I want to go through, like some loops with a little bit more complexity. And then I think we could start thinking about taking this exam. So again, you can watch these videos over and over. I will do a session on Tuesday, which is after the Easter Monday. I will do one next week, but it'll be a bit lighter than this. Won't be as code heavy. We're going to go straight back into remembering some and understanding some of the exam questions that you just have to know the answers to, and we'll start gearing ourselves up to gaining a qualification, which is thinking as a coder. And like I said, a great one to have on the CV. You'll have proven that you can do things really quickly, take it up really quickly, and we'll see and work out how we can do like an online quiz to test where you are. And when you get to a certain level of that quiz, we can say you can do it for real, and we'll pay for that and get it sorted through the school so you can get a qualification for digital, which shows that you thinking as a coder. Okay, so it's all good stuff. So like I said, thank you for coming along, a bit on time this week, maybe a little early. Go through the stuff that we have, keep practicing it over and over again, and I will see you next week. In fact, what I'll do when I finish this is I will put that in the diary, and you can see it there ticking along. And try and remember, because it won't be after school, it will be the Easter holidays, that you will still be available to do this here at 4 o'clock, a little bit below if you're watching the countdown. So like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for those people that have turned up. And yes, I'm on time, so that's a good thing. And yeah, have a good Easter break and relax. Maybe do a bit of coding. It's always fun. Thank you very much.